Okay, I realize some students are struggling with the method that we're giving them. I want to just point out that we have functions. I'll write this down for you. Y equals, and I guess I was using letters in class too, so I'm going to put A down. We'll talk about what these letters mean in a second. I'm going to write down the function being now a trig function, T-R-I-G. That's an abbreviation for a trigonometric function. Now, what trig functions do you have? You have sine, you have cosine, you have tangent, etc. All right? So we have trig function over here. Then this trig function is going to take an argument, and the argument is going to be bx plus c plus d. All right? Now what I want to do is just talk about the sine and cosine. All right? So because they have amplitude, they have a period, and we can shift them around. So I'm going to erase this over here, and I'm just talking about sine and cosine. All right? So let's just talk about the easy stuff first, easy things first. Let's talk about amplitude. The amplitude is very simple. All it is the absolute value of A. All right? Amplitude is the absolute value of A. Now let's talk about the period. The period is just the length that it takes for this trig function to complete one cycle. So although I got these abstractions A, B, and C down and a D, people get confused, rightfully so. But you would need to know that both for the sine and the cosine, one period for the sine and cosine standard function would be 2 pi. So to get the period over here, all I have to do is take 2 pi and divide it by the absolute value of B. And this would give me the period. All right? Now, someone says, well, in class you did a little bit differently. You kind of did the beginning and end. Well, it's really the same thing, but it's thinking about it. That's what we're doing. And again, this cycle keeps going itself. It goes 0 to 2 pi, 2 pi to 4 pi, 4 pi to 6 pi, so forth and so on. So it's one thing you could think through if you want. All right? Now, let's talk about a vertical shift. All right, so vertical shift. Let's write this down. Vertical shift. Now, it's going to be D, so the vertical shift is D. And I want to point out, if D is positive, it's upward. If D is negative, it's downward. All right. Now we did examples where we had numbers. We went through a lot of examples graphing. I know graphing's difficult, but right now, for the most part, we did all of these. I mean, every single one. And I'll probably put an example down in a second. But again, the trig functions we're talking about are for sine and cosine, period of 2 pi. Now, someone says, what would you get if you want to, tan and cotangent? Well, the tan and cotangent, and again, this is the period for sine and cosine, it's going to be a different number. It's pi. So the number on top wouldn't be 2 pi. Let me point out what I mean by that. This number here is going to change, by the way, for period. Now, what I mean by that is the bottom line, if we're talking about sine and cosine or their reciprocal functions, 2 pi is a period. But if you're doing tan and cotangent, the period there is pi. All right? So a little bit different. Let me go backwards on that. All right. Vertical shift, horizontal shift I really don't talk about in class. And I'll tell you the number one reason I don't do that is if you observe a function, even if you have a reference and you move the function around left or right, it's really tough to detect it. However, I do realize that WebAssign is asking for that question. And we're going to talk about horizontal shift now. All right? Let me write that down. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out a b on the argument. All right. So let me point out what the argument is. This is the argument over here. I'm going to factor the b out from that. All right, let's put that down. So what do you get? B is coming out. Whatever that b is, I would get x plus c over b. So the shift is going to be c over b, the shift. And this is something you did in Math 119. The shift is c over b. Again, the shift is c over b. Now, if c over b is positive, it's to the left. If c over b is negative, it's to the right. All right? So let's repeat this. The trig functions we mostly deal with are sines and cosines. All right? So we mostly deal with sines and cosines. The period for the sine and the cosine is 2 pi. This is also true for cosecant of x and secant of x. The period's still 2 pi. It takes 2 pi to complete a cycle. The only difference on the period of the parent functions is for the cotangent and tangent. So tangent and cotangent, the parent functions have a period of pi. And again, this is the period for these guys over here. All right? So this is the only place where the number is going to change. So again, if you're dealing with sine, cosine, cosecant, or secant, you're going to be using 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. If you're dealing with tangent or cotangent, you're going to deal with pi divided by the absolute b to get period. So again, the stuff that we've talked about in class, let me go back over this. We've talked about amplitude. We've been through many examples. We talked about period. We've done many examples. And these are typically things we ask about a function. What's its amplitude? What's its period? The things I really didn't spend much time on is vertical shift, fairly easy to do, and the horizontal shift, or the phase shift. All right? I'm hoping this clears some things up, but I do want to recommend, if you want, what you can do is go to YouTube. Let me get my eraser out. You can go to YouTube. And by the way, I think YouTube's a great place to learn. And what you do is you simply type in, that you're searching for, type in trig, phase, shift. And what are you going to get? You're going to get a ton of videos. Now, by the way, the first video you click on, you may not like it. Click on another one. May not like it. Click on another one. You'll find something. And typically what you find is you're going to find a channel that you like, that you go back to. If you do, I would recommend you kind of bookmark or at least get the guy's name down and go there, all right? So again, find someone you like. Right? It may be characteristics like voice or the way they're doing things, kind of whiteboard they're using, pen they're using, their penmanship. You find something. And the key there is why do you want to do that? You want to learn the material. All right? So the one way to learn the material is, certainly I say come to the Zoom lectures, read my notes, do my examples, do the WebAssign. But the bottom line is there's a lot of resources. You're living in interesting times, by the way. There's a lot of resources out there for you to learn the material. And again, I'm hoping what I'm doing is helpful, but if it's not helpful, what you need to do is look at alternative sources for it. But the goal is for you to master material, and the material that we're trying to master is trigonometry, and move forward. After you do this class, Math 120, you're going to go to Math 120 1, which is Calc 1. Thank you so much for paying attention.